Hi, I'm Matt Hawes of TheHappyShow, and I'm here today with a very special video. This video will serve not only as a commentary, not only as a discussion, but even as a review of some of the things that Archie Publications Incorporated has engaged in over the years. There are fair use laws that will allow people to use images and other materials that are copyrighted for the purpose of illustration and clarification, and again for discussion and review. I'm using this video to discuss something that happened to me recently. It was a situation where Archie Publications Incorporated decided to mark one of my videos for removal from YouTube claiming copyright infringement. It was a video satire of marketing practices which many comic book publishers in the comic book industry engage in. It also served as a spoof. If you have followed my videos, then you are aware of what I'm talking about. Earlier in 2007, there was an event in the comic book industry that reached the national media outlets. It had to do with the death of Captain America at Marvel Comics. This is not the first time that major publishers have used death as a sales gimmick to market their books. The use of death as a marketing gimmick in the comic book industry is a long tradition. I decided to make my satire using Archie Andrews from Archie Comics because it would deliver home a solid point. It is precisely because the whole idea, the very notion that Archie Comics would kill off Archie Andrews is so absurd that I chose him to make this point. The use of Archie Andrews served to underscore how ridiculous the whole ideal of using death as a marketing gimmick has become in the industry, and to expose the absurdity of it all. In addition, my video served as a spoof of another practice that the comic book industry engages in, one that Archie Publications Incorporated engages in itself, that is, to take long-standing comic book characters and to alter or change something about that character in an attempt to appeal to a newer or younger, fresher audience. A few years ago, Archie Publications Incorporated took their popular character Sabrina, the Teenaged Witch, and altered her to look more like a manga character. That is, the characters as they appear in Japanese comics and in anime, which are Japanese animated movies. More recently, they took the popular characters Betty and Veronica, and they altered their looks so that they look more realistic instead of like their former cartoony-looking selves. I was also making a parody on these sort of changes, and these are the kind of changes that even Archie has engaged in itself. That is why I did such spoofs as Anime Archie, Archie Goes Emo, and the new Archie. Clearly, these are spoof covers. Even Archie Publications Incorporated has engaged in these sort of practices of altering their characters to appeal to a younger audience. Therefore, I feel my parody was every bit as valid as any other parody. And therefore, I do get to claim fair usage. Now, many of you might be thinking, okay, Matt, your video is still on YouTube. You were allowed to keep it up on YouTube. All you had to do was add the introduction and the ending that stressed that Archie Comics would never kill their characters, and that Archie Andrews and his pals are all still alive in Riverdale. So what's the beef? My beef, frankly, is I don't like corporations strong-arming people. And I don't like being accused of any wrongdoing when I have done nothing wrong. Like many other big corporations, Archie Publications Incorporated has used the term copyright infringement as an excuse to trample over the rights of other people while it claims it's protecting its own rights. You are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. Perhaps the one thing that bothers me most, that aside from the fact that they act like I did something wrong when I did not, was that Archie Publications was trying to charge that I was using their characters in an unwholesome manner, particularly because my video, I guess, had to deal with death. It did not portray any of Archie's characters in any kind of manner that was unsavory, lewd, suggestive, or any other negative way other than to say that Reggie accidentally killed Archie due to a misunderstanding. The character of Reggie Mantle is known by anybody who reads Archie Comics to be a bully and to antagonize Archie on a regular basis. I do not portray him in a negative light any more than he's portrayed in the comics. He lost his temper and got into a fight with Archie. It's happened in the comics before. In this case, in my parody, supposedly he accidentally killed Archie. I would definitely contest any assertion that it was somehow unwholesome. When we talk about unwholesome, I think we should talk about Archie's own history. I will not be showing you any parodies here. This is going to be the real deal, because I don't know how many of you are aware of these things. So let's go ahead and talk about Archie. Archie Comics has a history of going out of its way to protect its trademarks and copyrights to the point that it sometimes overreaches its boundaries. In 1998, there was a trademark-driven domain dispute between Archie Comics and a 2-year-old. David Sams set up a website in honor of his 2-year-old daughter, Veronica, called Veronica.org. Archie Comics Company wanted the domain handed over because it holds the trademark on the name Veronica. Archie Comics Publications Incorporated owns the domain names to Veronica.net and Veronica.com, but they did not own the domain name to Veronica.org. That was owned by David and is owned by David Sams. Sams said this on the matter of the dispute with Archie Comics. "This is my daughter's first name. What gives them the right to own a first name? There are lots of Bettys and Veronicas before there were Archie Comics." Mike Silberkleit, publisher of Archie Comics, had this to say: "We have Veronica.com registered, and these people didn't want to give up the Veronica.org name for some reason. For some reason, because their daughter's name is Veronica." In a letter to Sams, Archie Comics lawyers, Grimes and Battersby, wrote that Sam's use of Veronica.org, quote, "infringes ACP's Veronica trademark," end quote. It goes on to ask that Sam's, quote, "cease all use of the internet domain Veronica.org and all use of the Veronica trademark," end quote, and to hand over the domain to Archie Comics. Sams was given a deadline on which to comply. In a letter responding to Grimes and Battersby, Sams wrote, "The Veronica.org name is owned by my 1.5-year-old daughter, Veronica Sams. Should you wish to take legal action, it's going to have to be against a toddler and her parents. Veronica's mother and I have registered this domain through our family-owned company on her behalf to commemorate her birth. I feel like David versus Goliath here," said Sams. "It's like, let's go after some little family that can't defend itself." Sam's letter to the company law firm argues that common first names of individuals are not protected by copyright. The category that Veronica is protected by trademark is Class 16 for comic magazines. If my daughter was trying to duplicate your Veronica artwork and or logo, that would clearly be a violation. However, I assure you that it's going to be a few years before she will have the skills necessary to even attempt to design a logo that could be confused with yours." Archie Comics, in light of the exposure by the media, eventually decided to drop the whole matter entirely. Currently, the Veronica.org domain will direct you to the Sams Direct website, which is still owned by David Sams. In 2005, Archie Comic Publications Incorporated went after another target. They went after a rock and roll duo, the twin sisters that formed a group known as the Veronicas. Now, the twin sisters did admit that their inspiration for their name, the Veronicas, did come from the Archie Comics character. Now, here's the thing. This is the music industry we're talking about, so you're not in direct competition with them, Archie Comics, so I don't believe there was marketplace confusion in this instance. And where do you stop? I mean, there was a song named Veronica by Elvis Costello back in the late 80s. And what about that TV series from UPN called Veronica Mars? What made you leave them alone? I do understand that there was some agreement reached by the Veronicas and Archie Comics, so at least they were able to patch things up in some manner. Now here's something that's really interesting coming up next. I'm a comic book shop owner. I own Comics Unlimited in Evansville, Indiana. And I bring this up because I also, as a fan, as well as a retailer, have a pretty good knowledge of the comic book industry, and I do seem to recall in the early 90s that there was a comic book called Punisher Meets Archie. The Punisher, Archie Meets the Punisher. I remember that it was published both by Marvel Comics and Archie Comics at the same period of time with different covers. Basically, the story goes that there's a character named Red who's a kind of lookalike for Archie. And he's trying to escape the law and he's trying to escape the Punisher. And so he travels to Riverdale. Now this sounds absurd, you may not believe it, but yes, this is a real comic book. Archie meets the Punisher. Now why do I specifically bring this one up? Because, again, my video parody, my video satire, my video spoof, it's all three, it dealt with the subject matter of a character dying. But that's where it ends, right? So, when Archie accused me of somehow doing something unwholesome because I dealt with the subject matter of death with their character, I have to think back on this series. Well, it wasn't a series, it was a one-shot, but still, this special that they put out, that they did in conjunction with Marvel. This story that dealt with a character from Marvel that was established from the very beginning as being a person who at first was a mercenary, but later a vigilante. The Punisher's not a nice guy. How is that wholesome, Archie Comics Publications Incorporated? And what was your intent with teaming up your wholesome, beloved character Archie with a character that has always been known to be this vigilante who uses not only violence, he outright murders people. He's a mass murderer. Now, I have no problem with the Punisher whatsoever when he's being basically marketed towards the proper audience. Marvel deals with a more mature audience, a more sophisticated audience in a lot of ways too. That's not a slam against Archie. Archie is meant to be, as a rule, wholesome family entertainment. So why did you have Archie team up with somebody who kills people? Now, many of you out there aren't comic book fans, so you may be wondering who the Punisher is. Of course, he's had movies. If you've seen the movies, that character is based off of a comic book character from Marvel Comics. That character was inspired by such things as the Executioner novels that were put out in the early 70s, as well as Dirty Harry movies. These are movies with graphic and novels with graphic violence that talk about vigilantes dispensing their own form of justice by killing the criminals. Punisher has always had this history. Anybody who knows the Punisher knows that this is what he is about. The Punisher himself has appeared in many forms of media. There have been the comics, there have been the movies, and there have been video games. And one constant in all of these is that the character of Frank Castle, the Punisher, is portrayed to be a driven vigilante who uses weapons like machine guns and knives and everything else to mete out violent justice to the criminals he dispatches. The Punisher movies that have been released have both been rated R. In fact, The Punisher from 2004, starring Thomas Jane, the rating by the MPAA was for pervasive, brutal violence, language, and brief nudity. Lexi Alexander, the director of Punisher Warzone, soon to be released, had this to say about the upcoming movie in 2008. On the rating for Warzone, she says, "It will definitely be a hard R. It's pretty dark and violent in the comic books, as the Punisher fans know. There is really no boundary to his darkness." And Punisher fans wouldn't have it any other way because that's what those audiences expect. Again, I have no problem with the Punisher being portrayed that way. In fact, that's what the Punisher is. And you knew that, Archie, when you teamed him with your character. Travis McFarlane of DVDVisionJapan.com wrote in his review of the Punisher video game by Volition, "When I think of the Punisher, I think of a violent and bloody vigilante out for revenge. Apparently Volition took what I thought, doused it in gallons of blood, torture, and empty shell casings, and created something that would cause the ESRB to implode upon contact. This game is based on the comics, and it captures the grisly and dank atmosphere present within its pages in appropriate detail. Nothing in Frank Castle's life is bright and cheery, nor is nothing in this game." From www.imdb.com, "Enter the mind of the Punisher, a vigilante driven by more than just revenge. Terrorize criminals using their own ruthless methods. Serve as judge, jury, and executioner in a world ruled by corruption. Live in the gritty, bullet-driven action ripped from the pages of Marvel's darkest stories." Where justice ends, punishment begins. Archie Comic Publications Incorporated willingly published a book that teamed its wholesome family character with the Punisher. So I have to ask you, in all sincerity, Archie Comic Publications Incorporated, you and even your legal representatives, when you say that somehow my video parody, the one that just said that Archie had died due to an accidental death because of Reggie losing his temper, when you say that, that somehow tarnishes and blemishes your trademark and your image and the connection, somehow affects the connection between you and your fans, what did you do when you teamed it with the Punisher? When you teamed your character, Archie Andrews, with the Punisher? Okay? Because we're talking about a character that, as you see, is known by many of its fans, by all of the fans of the Punisher. They know what he's about. That's why everybody, when they hear Archie meets the Punisher, they go, "You gotta be joking. Was that a real book? Was that real?" See, I've had that happen. I own a comic shop. Believe me, I've had people ask me that several times. They're like, "You're joking." I'm like, no. Archie Comics really teamed its character with the Punisher. So yeah, I'm going to ask you, how dare you say that somehow my video is more tarnishing to the image of your character than something you did yourself? And you know what? It was as a cheap marketing gimmick. What other explanation do you have? Why else would you team the Punisher with Archie? What other valid reason can you give? And then there, you tarnished the image, and you did more so than anything I could have done in what is just a parody video. This is not because you had me add a disclaimer at the beginning of the video, even though there was a disclaimer in that video. This is because I'm asking you, how dare you accuse me of somehow tarnishing, of sullying, of creating this bad will towards your characters when it did not happen. I don't expect an apology from Archie Comic Publications Incorporated. I think I deserve it. I don't expect it. I don't believe that my video in any way tarnished the image of Archie Comics, and I do strongly still assert that I had the right to make a parody and that I had the right to, under fair use laws, to use images I did, that I spoofed and parodied Archie Comics as well as the comic book industry in general with some of the things I said and did in that video. I'm not the one that's going around and giving hell to people who put up websites dedicated to their babies. And I'm not the one that's taking your wholesome characters and teaming them up with mass murderers. I wonder how many parents would really appreciate the fact that Archie was teamed up with the Punisher if they knew just what the Punisher was all about when that issue was released. This is all factual. This is all stuff that you did. I'm not saying anything that isn't true. I object to any claims that their rights were violated when they violated my rights. I don't think I did anything wrong. I will contend that. I will fight for that belief. And even though my video's up and we reached a compromise, I'm just making this clear for everybody out there that I did nothing wrong. And that I had every right to do my video, even if I didn't decide to make a compromise with you. So, there you go. That's my video. And I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah!